our last storyteller for the evening is a businessman in Charlotte. He's had a long, storied career in banking, and then the entrepreneurial spirit hit him in 2016, and he took over his own business. And a lot of people throughout Charlotte know him through that, but they do not know that he is an accomplished mountaineer. He has climbed mountains all over the world, and through that, he's made friends and been led by friends. He's been directed by people that he knew and knows, and by some people that he did not know. And it was mentioned before, and it's a perfect transition because our final story tonight, told by Walter Bridgeman, is Divine Intervention. So join me in welcoming Walter to the stage.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Bill. I appreciate that. Good evening. My name is Walter Bridgeman, senior. There's a junior back there in the back. I'm here to talk about divine intervention. Divine intervention climbing the Matterhorn and climbing Mount Rainier. In the format that Bill gave us, we're supposed to tell us a little bit about ourselves. So I'm basically from Charlotte, moved here when I was 2, so I can't claim native like Robbie. But what got me really into being in the outdoors was Boy Scouts. And I was fortunate enough to be a member of Troop 17, and it was just a great trip. We were very outdoor oriented, very make sure that we got our advancements and make sure that we did a good job in getting our advancements. We did great trips. We went to Mount LeConte in the wintertime, Longs Peak in 1970s. I didn't even know where Longs Peak was out in Colorado. We went out there, went up to Maine. So we were all over the place. And that got me even more involved in outdoors. We had books, Colin Fletcher, the Complete Walker. I read Maurice Horzog climbing Annapurna. Annapurna, it took them 6 months to even get to the mountain. That's how it was back in the 50s. In my bedroom, I had a poster of Jim Whittaker on top of Everest, the very first American to be on top of Everest, and a picture of K2. So I was all about climbing. This is what I wanted to do. Got my Eagle, ended up going and graduating from Chapel Hill. Then took a Knowles course out in Wyoming. And the sidebar on that is 3 friends. We drove out in a 1970 Volkswagen Beetle from Charlotte to Wyoming, had 2 cassette tapes, Best of the Grateful Dead and the Go-Go's. And for the next 30 years, I could sing every song that they had. And this is now, you're driving a 1970 Volkswagen Beetle, you're driving 50 miles an hour. And there wasn't a whole lot of conversation going on because there's no air conditioning, so the windows are down. And I can remember going almost 2 hours and someone said, flip the tape. So you had to push the button, flip the tape, put it in there, and the same old music playing. So it was one of those great trips that you had, talking about old memories. It's one of those that we still talk about. So after that, I got into banking, as Bill talked about, and really got into work. And I didn't do much as far as outdoors goes. Probably about 9-10 years later, a good friend of mine, who's no longer with us, Gary Matushak, comes up to me and says, "Hey, we were out in Seattle and we saw Mount Rainier. Would you want to go climb that? Because one of the scouts wants to go. And in order for him to go, he has to have some adults." And I'm going, yeah, why not? Let's go do that. And so that kind of started me out on climbing again and getting into outdoors. Got in shape, started running. And when we did the first Mount Rainier, I went out there with about 4 or 5 guys, and we did what they call the yo-yo. And the yo-yo is a hard trip because you start at 6,000 feet at Paradise Inn. You have a day of climbing where they teach you how to self-arrest and tie your knots. And then from there, you go up to 10,000 feet at Camp Muir, and from 10,000 feet, you spend the night and you wake up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and you try to make the summit. Well, that's a hard on the body, and plus the timing. If the weather's not good, then you're not going to make it. And unfortunately, we did not make it that time. We had slab avalanche conditions. It was up around 13,500 feet. Came back down, but I was hooked. I said, man, this is really what I want to do. I like this a lot. So we started doing more and more trips and went out to, as I mentioned, you only got one shot when you do the yo-yo. So we did a 5-day expedition and went out there for 5 days and learned how to do, expedition protocols. We looked at, then we wanted to do the Denali, and we took a winter expedition trip. And to really kind of get, hone our skills, we did Denali, climbed that, decided, and this was a bunch of us that were getting together. It was Rob Hagan, Doug Odom, Gary, and myself. We were kind of the core guys that went on almost all our trips. Gary and I decided, let's go to Europe, and so we went to climb Mount Blanc. And but what I was finding out is that when I mentioned these mountains to people, they didn't know where it was. Denali, where is that? Is that in North Carolina? Mount Blanc. So I said, look, I'll tell you what, let's do. Let's go climb an iconic mountain. People are going to know exactly what it is. And it's going to say, so it was the Matterhorn. I mean, everybody knows where the Matterhorn is, or at least has heard of it, right? So we got the trip planned. Unfortunately, the week before, my father passed away. And everybody was there at the house going, you go ahead and go. Your mother's going to be fine, but you go ahead and go. Because when you come back, it's going to be the hard time, right? That's when everybody's left and you're going to be there. So I said, okay. So I flew, Gary and I went with Gary with Tushak, and we flew different routes. I went Charlotte, Zurich, Geneva. And we decided that at Geneva, which is you take the CAM to Zermatt, that at the CAM, if you were not at the train station at 3:30, the next person was going to go ahead and go. So therefore, you're not just hanging around for all day waiting on somebody. So 3:30 cutoff time, because this was before the internet, for cell phones, for any of this, right? So 3:30, I got in, so I went there and went to our hotel in Zermatt. Checked in, and then went to the Alpine Center, which is where all the guides were, to sign in to say, that we're here, when we're going to go, and what day. Get back to the hotel, and here it had shown up. And our hotel had the best view of the Matterhorn. It's right there. And this is when sun's kind of setting in, and there was this huge star at the top. And I said, that's my dad. That's my dad. He's going to take care of me. He's going to make sure that I'm going to be fine. Gary shows up late that day, late that night. So the next morning, when you're doing high altitude climbing, and Matterhorn's like 14.8, you do high altitude climbing, you want to climatize, right? So you don't get any kind of cerebral or edemas or pulmonary edema. So we got on the trams and went up there and just try to get some altitude, look around, see the sights. Right, it's gorgeous out there. If you've ever been to Zermatt, it's fantastic. Came back down, and then the next day we were going to climb the Brighthorn. It's a fairly easy climb. Again, just trying to get our legs, in with us and get some altitude and get ready. And we had our packs and we were ready to go. And as we're walking past the Alpine Center, I'm like, wow. And I said, went past, and finally I felt it's like a tug on my shoulder. And it said, you got to go in there. And I went in, and they said, no, you're not climbing 2 days from now. You're climbing tomorrow. You have to go today. I'm like, wow. Okay, so we ran back to the hotel, unpacked, repacked our stuff, checked out a hotel, packed our bags and put them in storage, and we scampered on up up on the trams. And it's probably about a 4 or 5 mile hike to the hut that you start at the Matterhorn. I think it's about 10,000 feet. It's where you start from. So it was a good long hike. It's a gorgeous hike, and it was fantastic. We get to and I'm shooting a 35 millimeter camera, right, with film. Kids today don't even know what film is. And as I'm going through my pack, I'd taken the last picture, and I'm going through my pack, and I'm looking around, and I pulled out, found my, the little 35 millimeter canisters, black with a little gray top, and I opened it up. And you ever had where the brain doesn't compute? I opened up, and there's normally supposed to be a little rat tail. I grabbed the wrong film. They were all shot. And I'm shooting slides. And so it's a very esoteric, I'm not shooting just regular film. So I'm like, God, all right, what am I going to do now? So I went and checked, downstairs, and nobody had any. And I'm kind of, I'm going to be climbing the Matterhorn, not going to be able to take a picture. And laid in bed, and Gary comes back about 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, and says, "You got 5 francs?" I'm like, "Yeah, I got 5 francs." He says, "I found your film." And it's the exact same film I was shooting. It was slides with the same outdoor exposure. I'm like, wow, how great is this? And so put it in there, had a fresh roll of film ready to go. We got up at 3 o'clock in the morning. We're climbing at 4. And you're just you and the guide. It's just you two. And if you've ever climbed with a European guide as opposed to American guide, they're very different. American guides, it's like a latte. Are you hungry? We can stop. You need to take a break. European guys is, well, you're going to go. We're going to go up, right? And I mean, it was that pace. We're climbing. And so he and I are tied together on a rope. And also here is their carabiners, and you're really tied into to the mountain when you're climbing. There's a piece of rebar, and they just throw the rope over. And I guess if you fall, you're both going to cantilever off that piece of metal. So we're climbing, and if you've ever seen the Matterhorn, it's a lot of exposure. And we're climbing, and there was one point where I put 1 foot here, climbing up, and it's like a 4,000 foot drop here on the north face, and on the east face right here is about 3,000 feet. And then I look up, and there's a plaque of someone who had died 10 years ago, and I'm like, focus, 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 right? And so we get up to the Solvay hut, and the Solvay hut is a hut they built, I think, in like 1912, and it's really cool to be up there to have it at that height. So got some water, got something to drink, got something to eat, and then we switched on our crampons. So now we're going to be doing mixed climbing, which is, it's hard enough climbing, but now we're going to be climbing rock and ice and snow in crampons. So you had to be real careful about what you're doing. And so we were making it up and making pretty good time. And then as you get to the top, probably about 14,000 feet or so, they have these big ropes. Like, you remember Batman climbing up? So you're up there climbing with these big ropes, and you pop up, and then there's a pretty good slant, and then you climb that, and then you're on top. You're on the summit. The summit, you can straddle it. I mean, there's no room on that thing. You can straddle it. And so we went, we got some pictures made, and then we got back down. And so from top to bottom, it was 8 hours, 4 hours up and 4 hours down to get down. So got back down, we looked up at things and said, man, how in the world do we even climb that? I don't know, but I'm glad we did, aren't you? Yes, but I am. So we get to the hotel, we check back in. Remember I told you we had a great view on front end? This one, they gave us a picture of our view was a dump. And we had the dumpsters. I'm like, there's no way to greet the victors. So we decided to go to Chamonix for a couple days afterwards. I love Chamonix. It's a great place to be. And we're sitting on the train, and there was a lady who was pretty distraught. Like, hey, what's going on? She was supposed to climb the Matterhorn that day, but weather had come in. So if we'd climbed the day I thought we were supposed to climb, we would not have made it. But divine intervention came in and said, no, you're going to climb on this day. And we had the perfect weather. So it worked out great. The second trip, again, the core group, except it was it was Gary, Doug, Rob, and Fletcher Roberts. We decided we're going to go out to Mount Rainier. And on this one, though, we're going to do a little different twist. We're going to spend the night on top, and we're going to have a good time. So we went and spoke to the Rangers, and they said, "Yep, that's fine. You go ahead and do it. Sounds like a great trip." So we went up and camped at 8,000 feet, kind of mimicking what we did on that expedition trip. Remember I told you about the 5-day? Got there at 8,000 feet, set up camp, worked on self-arrest, worked on our knots, all that stuff that we're supposed to do. The next day, went up to 11,000 feet, spent the night, and then started dividing up our gear. Because we're going to spend the night. We didn't want to carry all our stuff up there, so we just carried what we thought we need. But again, being good Boy Scouts, we carried extra food, extra fuel, and so next morning, head to the top. No problems. Get there, set up camp, and it's like, wow, this is pretty good. And we ended up, has anybody been to the top of Mount Rainier? It's pretty big. I mean, it's not a peak. I told you that the Matterhorn, your straddling thing, it's a extinct volcano, and so the crater rim, it may be a mile in circumference. So it's pretty big. And where we come up, I think it's from the south side. It's the low side of the summit. So the actual true peak is a little spot over here. So you have to cross over. Excuse me. You had to cross over and get to the top. So we actually got to the top, signed our names, so we're official. As we were hiking, we saw a group over here they were from France, and they were studying glaciers, and there's an actual lake underneath the summit. And so they were studying all of that. And then coming back, and we spent the night, no big deal, and the next morning, we were expecting to have the climbers coming over, right? Because remember the yo-yo? It's a machine. They got those guys coming in, and there was nobody coming up and over. And we're kind of going, wow, this is kind of odd. It'll be this way. So we pack up, and we start hiking back down, start climbing back down. And what had happened is the snow bridge that we had climbed, and we climbed up the next day, had collapsed. And so we had three choices. The three choices were walk around, try to find, another route. That didn't sound too good. The other one was to jump, and if it's undercut, it could fall. Or if you made it, you got your crampons on, you have a thing called a spiral fracture where your foot stays planted, your body turns around, and your shin twists. We couldn't find any volunteers. Gary, you do it. No, Doug, you do it. No, Rob, you do it. No, Fletcher, you do it. So I said, all right, let's go back up. So we went back up top and set up camp. And because I knew that the Rangers would kick in a new route. I knew they would do that because, again, they got the pressure down there. They got these guys flying in from all over the country. We're going to climb Mount Rainier. We're not going to put them in factors. You can't put a new route in, so they're going to do that. So sure enough, we spent the night, and we felt confident that we were going to be able to get down the next day. Around 5 o'clock in the morning, we hear somebody walking up, and it was a guy named Gator, who was a National Park Ranger. He says, "Hey guys, I want to let you know there's going to be a Chinook helicopter coming over in about 10 minutes. Guy down here at the expedition is not doing well. They're going to fly him off." Sure enough, man, big old Chinook. That's the one with the two copters going. Sure enough, that thing lands over there. And, when you see helicopters, they normally take up and go. This one, when it took off, it went down, right? Because it's going down the mountain. So it's like, wow, okay. We see that now the people are coming up and over, so we know there's a new route kicked in, so that was great. We put our packs on, packed up, went on down, and then when we got down to Paradise Inn, which is a great old inn they built in the 20s, we're standing there trying to get something to eat. We're hearing about that buzz around. Did you hear about those crazy people up on top of the mountain? They got stuck up there. You think they knew what they were doing? And all the rumors flying around. And we're like, what are they talking about? Oh, they talking about us. So fast forward a year. As I mentioned, I was in banking. I had a great customer that was in Vancouver. So we would fly to Seattle because if we flew to Vancouver, you wouldn't get any freaking flyer points. So we'd always fly to Seattle and then take a puddle jump over there to Vancouver and back. And so we had taken, came back and decided we're going to take the red eye, which if you've ever taken the red eye, I don't know why they have them. I would never take it again. But I'm flying with Denise Roberts, and we're out seeing our big customer, and we're walking, and I see a newspaper stand, and all of a sudden I felt that tug. I'm like, anybody knows me, I never have any money. So Denise, you got any money I can borrow? And sure enough, she had enough coins, so I bought a newspaper. Right here. And it is the Tacoma Times. It's not even the Seattle Times. I mean, it's Tacoma. But looked at it and it says, wow, this is pretty cool. Okay, it doesn't even show anything about Mount Rainier on there at all, right? So as I'm looking at this, and I'm on the plane now, and also I got the row right before the exit, which doesn't go back that half inch, right? That half inch that allows you to have an enjoyable flight. So I'm just rigid the whole way, and I'm flipping through here, and all of a sudden I see this. I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. This is really neat. I'm reading, I'm looking at it. Yeah, that's what I did. Yeah, I know all about this stuff. Well, here's a guy, Andy Dalton, who climbed Mount Rainier with a bunch of French scientists. I'm going, wow, that's pretty cool, right? And then, as I'm reading more of it, there's a picture of the Chinook. If you look, there's a picture of all of us. 5 people in the world that was in there, and I have me walking by that newspaper stand, and it said, somebody said, hey, grab you, and there it is. And how cool is that? And so, and I've had this for such a long time. I've been on Bill's case to get me up here so I can, so in case if I ever lose this thing, I want to have my props. But anyway, those are my 2 stories. I thought they were pretty funny. And again, as my dad really got us through there, if it hadn't been for him, we'd have been one of those people, yeah, we tried to make it, but it snowed on us. We couldn't make it. So anyway, that's it. Short and sweet. Yep.
You have a book?
Yeah, let's see. No book here.
Movie rights? They are for sale.
We're going to start the bidding right now.
Yeah, that's right.
Are there any questions for Walter Bridgeman in Divine Intervention? Walter's been on the list. The way this works is we hear stories. We've known Walter for a long time.
You got to pay. It's graft. It's payola. You got to pay.
Walter is one of the few people who have shopped in all 5, I think, four of the Jesse Brown's locations for the past 53 years in Charlotte. So let's give him another round of applause.